Welcome. This is Logan Cockrum with Action Coach Bluegrass in Southern Indiana, and you're listening to the Success Through Action podcast, where we're talking to successful business owners to hear their stories and how they took action to grow their businesses. All right, so we are here today with Amanda Jacobs from Amanda Jacobs Design. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
To begin today's conversation, I just want to know a little bit more about who you are. You do really good work with interior design, but let's talk about your background a little bit.
I think my background in regards to design from the very get-go was really pushed from my upbringing. My parents provided a comforting and warm home. And I think that, part of design is not just having a beautiful space, but it's like, touching all of those senses and having elements of warmth and comfort and beauty and hospitality and history and sentimental things. And so having experienced that in my upbringing is kind of what inspired me to push forward in this career, because I believe in it. I believe that our environments shape who we are, that they not only affect our well-being, but they can actually be the cause of our well-being, or actually the opposite of that, not having it. So I think it's just something that I'm really passionate about, and I want to help other people do. And so this has been, a gift that I get to be part of every day, which, I'm really happy about.
Were your parents artistically inclined?
Yeah, they are. My mom, she's from a long line of artistically inclined people. My grandfather was an artist, a wood carver, photographer, and he loved classical music. I have fond memories of going into their little living room and him playing a record of, Tchaikovsky or some old Russian romantic. And I also know that from that stemmed my mother, who played guitar and she sang, and she's a beautiful writer. That was really inspiring. And she also encouraged that in us. She encouraged a lot of creativity. So my siblings and I all have different talents and gifts when it comes to that. I was the only one who kind of went this direction with interiors, but we all sing and play piano and do other things like that.
So what did your parents do, if you don't mind me asking?
No, my dad's a sheet metal worker. He's retired, so he worked for the union for many years. And then my mom, she actually homeschooled us. So she was a stay-at-home mom and teacher and all of the other jobs that go with that. There's 7 children in my family, so it was definitely more than a full-time job. And getting to be around her all the time, being homeschooled before I went to public school in like middle school age, but having that adolescent time just like constantly with your mother was really influential. And I think that's what other parents have in mind when they're homeschooling, like being able to be with their children more and getting to be a stronger part of their life. But they're both really inspirational to me, and I'm close with them now. We have a really close relationship, and I definitely think that they're not surprised that I went in a creative direction with my career.
So maybe a good segue here. So what you do and why I was interested in talking to you is you're essentially a creative expression of beauty. You're taking someone's vision and you're expressing it for them. Because me, for example, I have a really good imagination, but I don't have the ability to make my idea as beautiful as the idea is in my mind, if that makes sense. But you also discussed how your living space can affect your attitude and your well-being. And I think what we're seeing, or at least I hope we're seeing in the corporate world, is 20 years ago, the dull cubicle with a computer screen was common. And I think that the empirical research is showing that creating a beautiful working space is also important. So have you worked with corporate?
No, I have not worked with corporate. Actually, we've talked to clients, and certain businesses have come to us about wanting to move towards that direction. I've definitely wanted to do that. I think there's some bigger companies that invest in their spaces, knowing that that really affects the morale of the team, and people actually work harder and better when they feel better in their spaces. So I think that we're going in the right direction. As far as Louisville goes, I hope that there's a market for that. I hope that our larger corporations are seeing beyond the cubicle and the grays and the dull colors, and even worse, the no natural light. I just don't know how people can work in the caves and feel inspired. And believe it or not, you don't have to have a creative business to need to be inspired, right? Like you could be doing anything in tech and still need inspiration to do your job. So I hope that what I do becomes more common. You know, at one time we didn't believe in music therapy, and we're starting to see a shift in that. You know, this is kind of going off topic, but we see a shift now that people actually believe in this kind of therapy. And I think in our spaces, because they really do, our environments, they affect our emotions, that I think that hopefully we are going to see a stronger shift in all of us following at least some sort of guidelines and a foundation on how to set up our spaces.
Well, I think we're seeing a shift. I hope we're seeing a shift in small businesses creating cafes, for example, and the artistic beauty inside retail spaces right now, I think, has just skyrocketed. For example, I had a chance to see in person your work at Grale's in Louisville. Explain to me kind of your process behind that location for people that aren't familiar with it.
So there's Gralehaus and there's Holy Grail. For Holy Grail, I get really excited talking about this one because first and foremost, the muse is the client themselves, right? What is their business representing? What is the message that they want their customers to feel when they enter their space? Of course, they're going to have a wonderful product. They have that. They have the great product. They have an amazing chef. They have the best beer. They have the best wines. And so they're providing that to the client. But then beyond that, what do people feel when they go into their space? And this particular client was really inspiring to me because she had a lot of soul and a lot of heart for doing things with passion and meaning. And it was not just another bar. And so this bar in particular, before the renovation, they had a lot of Last Supper. They're famous for this, and I think it was really funny and smart, but they had Last Supper paintings and posters everywhere. And it was like Star Wars Last Supper and this Last Supper. But the way that this client spoke to me was with so much seriousness and so much intention about the experience that her customers were getting that I was like, we're not going to replicate this again. We're not going to do, jokes on the Last Supper. Let's make it truly feel like a worship space, but didn't want to be sacrilegious in any way. I wasn't trying to make a play on it or a joke on it, but what is it about beautiful churches that we love? Oh, it's art. It's history, so much history. We're talking about mosaics and plaster and arches and columns and iconography. And so in my mind, I was like, what a interesting way to work with their business and their brand and everything that she's trying to represent, to give the people the experience of coming into a beautiful, not in a sacrilegious way, but like sacrificial kind of space. So it seems really extreme and crazy for a bar, I think, but I loved that idea of showing people without going to church what it feels like to be in a church, but then have this experience with these amazing products and these things that she wants to share with the world and that she's passionate about. So I think what's interesting about the ultimate result was that when people walk in, there could be a little bit of an uncomfortableness maybe at first. You're like, what is this that I'm feeling? Because it's deep. We don't want to feel that. We actually want to shove that stuff down and not feel any emotions, but it makes you feel something, whether it's good or whether it's bad. I think it leaves a mark. And I think that's the power of spaces, right? So you go in there and you sit down and you're like, I don't know what this is. Maybe I'm a little uncomfortable with it, but I'm going to sit here and I'm going to enjoy a beer and I'm going to see what this is about. It was a joy to do it. And I love going back to that space because I get a really distinct feeling from it, probably for different reasons for me. But I think that ultimately we achieved what she wanted, which was a rebirth of this great business that was already really successful. We weren't trying to change it. We were just trying to expand. We grow and we evolve. And that's what it showed.
I think some of the beauty of that space is just the individuality when you work with a small business. If you go to a corporate cafe, corporate bar, they are starting to incorporate a lot of beauty into their spaces, but it feels kind of static in some respects. With Grale's, I don't think there's another Grale's, right? I mean, that's her unique vision that you've interpreted.
Yeah.
And I think that expression is going to help her business because it is a unique experience when you walk in there. Let's talk about that a little bit. It's like you're essentially working with business owners to bring their vision into reality. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely will.
How do you go through that process when you work with a new business owner? How long does that discovery process take before you feel comfortable taking their vision into a space?
That's a great question. And it's probably different for every designer, but there might be a misconception that it takes like lots of studying and research when truly it's very much instinctual. I think there's a lot of natural gut, like, okay, let me hear you out. Let me hear everything you have to say. And my job is to kind of pick up on the cues in between a lot of the words that they're saying and get to the emotion of it, grasping what do they want it to feel like? What does it mean to them? What do they want it to mean to their clients? Because a really general way is for a client to walk in and be like, I just want everybody to want to be here. I just want everyone to love it. And I'm like, that totally get that. But who is your ideal customer? Who is your ideal client? Who is it that you want to be in here and spread the word about your business? And what is it about you that you want to be in your business? Because when they want to take out their own individualism, it's really hard to have a clear focus. So I think the big process is talking more to them and finding out why they started the business, what it is that they want to accomplish, what their message is, and then from that, how do they want their space to feel? And it is a very fun process. I enjoy doing it. I would say that initially I can get a lot off of the first one or two conversations. That can lead a lot because from there, you have a million different directions as far as design. But there's only a few formulas that achieve this type of feeling or this type of emotion in a space. So I just like to follow a pattern of what I know works. And then I get to be risky with the design elements and the colors and textures and all of those other things that come into play as we start making decisions and building the room. But I think that number one, I can't do it without a client. I need to have some sort of person who's going to inspire that and move it along. If it were my own project, then I would use myself as the inspiration. What do I love? What makes me feel good? What do I want to surround myself with? So that would be the same thing with them.
Businesses are the owner's baby in some respect. So do you ever feel pressure to overperform and bring their product to light exactly as how they want it? Or do you feel like you have a little bit of leeway for your own creative expression?
There is definitely a mix of some clients who give me lots of leeway and then others who you start to feel like them pulling back the reins. I think that's fear and loss of control because it is their baby. I personally feel like it is my responsibility to push them beyond their comfort zones, to push them beyond these boundaries that they've laid, because that is what makes a space beautiful, is like taking those risks. And I'm comfortable taking those risks because I know from my experience and what I believe that the outcome will be satisfactory. For the most part, when clients start to question decisions and not feel like they can relinquish full control, I think it's strictly out of fear. And I understand it completely. It's really difficult to like say, okay, I fully trust what you're doing. They're investing money. So that's a huge part of it, right? If they had all the money in the world, maybe they wouldn't be as concerned. But I kind of want to be like, what's the worst that's going to happen? You know, if the color is not right and you really disagree, then we change the color and then we find another balance. There's so many different ways that we can go back and forth to create this overall vision, even if this element has changed. But I definitely feel like I would be doing a disservice to not push our clients further in that process. If I just went with exactly what they wanted, then I don't really think that I would be necessary for that process.
Are there clients that you've turned down? Is there certain projects that you wouldn't work on?
There's definitely clients that I would say, you know, that I'm happy with that result, but I know it could have been better had you have not tried to change, you know, this element or that element in the end. Ultimately, it's their space. So like I can't go beyond urging them to try to stick with the plan. And of course, we move forward with plans. We present them and we say, this is what it's going to look like, feel like. So it's not like a total shock. No one should ever be shocked at the end of it. But it's very overwhelming to see what it takes to get there and all of these decisions that have to be made to get there. And when you start breaking it down into these little details, that's when they start to get overwhelmed. For me, that is my most favorite part. I love all the details. I love trying to figure out how high the tile goes up, where it cuts off and where the trim begins and what kind of threshold we have here. That's where it starts to like become like, I can't make one more decision. for clients to fully embrace and get the most value out of this process, out of hiring someone like me, is to have trust. Believe it or not, as personal it is to them, it's very personal to me as well, because this is something that I believe in. You know, I believe in their project. I believe in their business. I believe in having a wonderful space at home. So I'm not trying to lead anyone astray, but there has to be an element of like, I got you. I know what you want, and this is how you get it. It's not the way you think. This is how you get it. So you got to trust me that we take this risk here or that risk there. And this other thing that felt really important actually isn't. We can just replace that with this part. You know, so that's still very vague. And so I'm trying to like see if I could give you a better example. But I know that if we can't follow through with a plan from the very beginning, something will be missing. And then when they're not satisfied with it, you have to be like, you had to have just trusted us and let us continue it down to the last drop.
So I'm assuming you still feel ownership of the space.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of that, because I do believe interior design is an art. There's a giving of myself. Clients are paying me for my interpretation of what the space should look like. So it is very personal to me. And that's what I love about it. You know, that's why we buy original art. That's why we listen to music. We all have our individual tastes. And for me, I would not be a very good designer if I didn't use my own influence and my own perspective on what I thought beauty was into that space. So they all feel special to me in different ways. I feel connected to them in different ways. And I think there's a misconception that designers, we just design things to our taste. I'm a firm believer that is not the case at all. I think that style and design are two very different things. And I have my own personal style and everybody else has their style. But it's what I see as beautiful and how I interpret their style is what they're hiring me to do, not give them my style.
Your obstacle or your job, I guess, trying to find the right word, has so many interplay of variables. So you have to obviously put their vision in. You have budget concerns, but then you have to think about, what about the clientele? What about the customer? What's the customer experience like? So you have all these different things that you have to incorporate at the same time. So I feel like it's not as simple as interior design. This is marketing too, in some respects, because who is your ideal clientele? How do we attract them? Your space is going to attract people that like the space, and there's a certain demographic that's going to like the space. So do you view yourself in that respect too, especially as you're working with businesses and not just residential?
I definitely do. First and foremost, for a commercial client, it is very much about the customer experience. It does have a lot to do with marketing. And there are some clients who want to give off a certain message from their space. So that's a really important role of mine. It's not just to make it look pretty, but it's to make them feel A, B, and C. I think social media plays a huge part in that too. If a consumer loves the space they're in, they're going to photograph it and they're going to share it. And it can spread a lot faster than versus someone just saying, I loved that spot. Go check it out sometime. Instead, you get the little taste of it from an image. So I think that how the space appears on paper also is important for them. So not only does it have to feel a certain way and look a certain way, but it has to appear in images well and somehow translate that feeling as well. I do take it really seriously, and that's why I think that a lot of business owners need to think more about investing in the interiors. I think sometimes, and I get it, because it's like you're throwing everything into the product and you're throwing everything into even the renovation and hiring, that all of a sudden, like, the interiors is like way down here. And like, we'll just paint the walls and we'll buy some second-rate furniture from a restaurant supply store, and that's it. But you've missed the mark. You've missed like this whole opportunity to change people. Some of the best spaces I've been in, and ones I haven't designed, of course, I've been in plenty that I've left like, gosh, I don't know what it was, how that affected me in a certain way, but I loved it. And I think that a well-designed space curates that feeling. Like, we know what we're doing. We're actually trying to make you feel this way. You just can't put a finger on it, that combination, what it was that did it, but you leave feeling something. And that's what matters.
Well, and I think interior design is art. That's an important distinction that you made. But, you know, it's like, why do people pay to go to a museum to look at paintings on the wall? We are, as a species, attracted to beauty. So if you can incorporate that into your business space, I mean, it is an investment. especially with the social media that we have. I would say it's an incredible investment depending on what business you own and if it's retail, or you see it more with these, and maybe I'm wrong, but like cafes and bars and stuff of that sort. But I think any space would benefit from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that there's also a misconception that beauty is surface level. Most of us, when we think about the truth behind beauty, we're not just thinking like physical outward appearance, but it's more of an emotion. And I think that the problem with some business owners is we're thinking that, oh, well, we just want it to look a certain way, but it's actually, we want it to feel a certain way, but also that it can function a certain way, that utility and beauty are mutually generative. It's not just one without the other. It also has to function. And that's where that hospitality aspect comes in. Not only should the space look beautiful, but it should function beautifully and have that utility. And also it should be able to be used. And so just to have gorgeous plates in a cabinet and not actually pull the plates out and serve your guests on those plates, then it's like we're missing the mark a little bit. And it's not just to appear a certain way, it's to function a certain way. And so if we were able to get that across to our clients, that it's not just about having a pretty space, but it's also about a pretty functional, well-working space. And that those two go hand in hand.
That comes back to the customer experience, right?
I think if they're able to touch and feel and participate in what's surrounding them, that has a much stronger effect versus just appearing.
Yeah, and not to get outside of my area of expertise, but if I'm trying to bill my, for example, from a restaurant as an experience instead of just a product or a place to eat, I'm also probably going to be more likely to be able to charge more for my products, and I can attract higher quality employees.
Yeah.
The benefits to it are endless, but some of the problem is that with marketing, for example, if I just do traditional marketing, I can define my ROI. So, if I invest $100, I'm more likely to get this outcome with physical investment. So if I'm investing in beauty, how do you even put an ROI on that? So do you struggle with that? Are there customers that are not sure of the benefits?
There's research out there that actually proves that spaces that feel and look a certain way have a higher ROI that kind of justify and validate a client charging more. There definitely is that research. Also, the aspect of a client just has to believe what I believe, which is that this investment in making a space look and feel a certain way is what I want for my clients. So I think it's a matter of finding people who want to hire me because they believe in my mission, they believe in what I believe, and that they back me on that and I back them on that. It's very much collaborative. But if you don't see the value in a beautiful space and you're like, let's just slap some stuff in there, and as long as it's kind of new or painted the blue color of our branding, then we're not going to see eye to eye. And people will potentially have a fine experience in your establishment, but they won't leave changed. And they won't leave like, this business has affected me in an interesting way. So I think that they can actually lose a lot from not thinking further into it. But there definitely is numbers and research and things that a customer could look up to see the effect of what interiors do. And also it's like we see it in our everyday life. We know that if our room is messy and we don't clean up and this is broken and that's broken and we don't take care of our stuff, that we're not really feeling so great in that space. So it's like comes down to the fundamentals of what we surround ourselves with. So I do think that if the client doesn't really see it that way, then they probably wouldn't be investing in hiring me anyway. The most important thing to me is that interior design is looked at as much deeper and influential art and how instrumental it can be in affecting our behaviors and the environments that we're in. And I hope that, like you said, we kind of are seeing a shift in that direction. I hope that we continue to see this and it continues to grow and grow and grow. And we can all kind of benefit from having more warm and inviting and comfortable spaces, especially out in the world beyond our homes. We'll always put the effort in. We're more inclined to put the effort in where we live every day. And that's wonderful. But I also think that we need to think beyond that and like our workspaces our restaurants, our bars, all these other spaces also to include and kind of get on the wagon that way. So I really hope that it's all about making spaces feel like home. And that's what I continue to keep pushing, and I'll keep doing, forever and ever if I'll be allowed to. And I'm really grateful that I get to talk about it on this kind of platform, because I think we don't get the opportunity to go into this much depth, generally about this topic.
I really appreciate what you're doing. I hope you know that. Especially when I saw that space, I was like, yeah, I'm glad that I had her on. I'm glad that she responded.
I appreciate it. It's nice to have a platform to kind of get into this, because I could talk all day on this topic. So I appreciate it.
Well, hey, hopefully you had fun, and we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Have a beautiful day.
You too. Bye-bye.
To everyone who tuned into this episode, thanks for listening to the Success Through Action podcast. Make sure to take action, and I'll see you next time.